Okay, so we're going to talk about creating new tracks in Pro Tools. We can go to to track and hit new, or we can hit Command Shift plus the letter N. We're going to get the dialog here for new tracks. There's a couple track options that we have. We can make our tracks mono or stereo. We could also do them in 5.1 if the I/O is configured in that format. The track options we have are audio tracks for anything audio, aux tracks for subgroup routing, as well as things like reverb and effects, and we could use it for headphone mixes as well. A master fader, which will control the overall final output of the master mix, and MIDI tracks for MIDI information, which are great for external routing, and they're really designed for externally routing MIDI. But if we're going to do internally routing MIDI to virtual instruments, we want to use the instrument track. And again, these can be in mono or stereo. The reference to ticks versus samples. Samples, in terms of time-based, are used by audio tracks, and you'll notice that ticks are used by the MIDI tracks. And the real difference is samples are utilized in a reference of samples per second, where ticks are actually a subdivision of the quarter note. So there are a certain amount of ticks to each quarter note. You'll want to be able to utilize tick mode for quantization and warping. So that's when it really comes into play. If we want to add more tracks or different types of tracks, we could say, all right, well, we're gonna make one mono audio track and one stereo. We just click this add button, or we can hold Shift, Command, up or down. Pretty simple there. But let's go ahead and create. Actually, what I would like to do is I always start off with a master fader. The reason being, of course, that you have to have control of your master output. Once you have more than one track, on an average, the rule is per every track you add, if they're roughly the same volume and they're outputting at a nominal level, you're losing about 3 decibels of headroom, just on average. There is an actual long formula for that. But overall, you basically want a master fader because you're going to actually have to compensate for that decibel loss as you add tracks. I'm going to go ahead and add and create an instrument track so I can show you how to create a virtual instrument. So what I'm going to do first is I have my instrument track. Let's just say I'm going to call this synth. So I'm just going to double click the nameplate for instrument 1. I'm going to type in synth, okay, ready to rock. We have our master fader and we have our synth track. Now it's always crucial if I'm going to record anything to go to track, hit create click, because I want to click track before I start doing anything. Go to the click track over here, and I changed windows by going to the mix window by hitting command, the command equal sign, command plus equal is a hotkey. Go to the mix window, and I click on my insert, and let's roll this. I prefer these to be actually little changes to the unaccented block, which is what the ACC is. I'm going to change these to block. That's what I'll hear with my click. Go back to my edit window. And if you don't see this already on your screen, if you use this little menu right here, drop down, make sure you see tempo listed. I'm going to double click on the tempo here. It's going to say, all right, you want a tempo change. I'm going to say, all right, I prefer to go to at 110. All right, and you can change your BPM resolution here. You could also do the same thing if you go into our event, tempo operations window, and you'll see the exact same kind of format. Difference here is this allows you to make changes to how the tempo will adjust. If you wanted the tempo to, let's say you're using this linear adjustment for the tempo, and you're like, all right, well, I want my tempo to start at, let's just make this the beginning, okay? And I want it to end at bar 20, beat 1. My tempo is going to start at 110, and in between those two bars, it's going to move from 110 to 140, and you'll hit apply. And then what it's going to do is it's actually going to create, and if you just open up this drop down here, you'll see it. It's going to create this, what they call linear tempo adjustment there as it goes. If we undo that, if you actually open up this drop down with the tempo, you can actually take the grabber tool and adjust your overall tempo just by grabbing and dragging it. It'll shift the overall tempo of the session. You'll see the grid. What you see moving is the grid. And that's what those grid numbers are, bars and beats. Let's change this over here so that we're looking at bars and beats in the grid here so it's nice and easy to see. But if you go and grab your pencil tool, you can actually literally just, make adjustments to this. Sorry, this is actually not set to freehand. Sorry, let me set this to freehand. You could actually use the line tool if you were going to just make nice, easy, up tempo, down tempo stuff. You could freehand it as well, though. Very simply, just draw it in, to your little heart's desire. Now, most people don't need all that. Most people, what they're really looking for are they're maybe just looking for a single instance where they want to, make one tempo change, and so we can just go in and say, all right, we're going to change from here, to here. A lot of times it helps to be in grid mode when you make this particular adjustment, because in that way you know that it's going to fall on a bar and a beat and actually change at that point in time. So it's a little helpful. Anyway, there's that tempo information in the instrument. So I'm going to go ahead and create a synth. I'm going to call it synth. I'm going to double click on the instrument channel. Sorry, so there's my synth. I'm going to go to the mix window. And in my inserts, I'm looking to create multi-channel plugin instrument. Now, I'm going to go ahead and open up the vacuum because it's just a basic synth. And with my keyboard controller, I'm going to open this up. Now I have to record enable it. So just if you open this up and you're like, I'm not getting any signal, you have to record enable it, which is this little button right here. You can record enable also from the edit window. Record and enabling is super important, and the reason why it's set up like that is because technically you have one controller and you could have multiple virtual instruments up. It just needs to know which ones you're trying to queue up. All right, pretty simple, and that's ready to rock. Now if I'm ready, I can just go in and essentially I don't need this window up unless I'm going to make adjustments to it. And I may pick one of the presets that exist here. So if I go up to the top here where it says factory default, maybe I'll take one of these leads. There we go. I can go ahead and close this window. As long as I'm record enabled, I can hit return to start from the beginning of the track. And then what I'm going to do is I can use this transport here and say, all right, we're going to record. And then as soon as I push play, we go. Whatever. And then you can stop. You could also use Command Spacebar, which is very popular. Command Spacebar actually cues off recording. If you wanted to utilize a transport, you go to Window, open up Transport. It's also hotkey Command 1. You can set things like pre-roll. If you're like, hey, I need a 2-bar pre-roll. Start from the beginning. Let's get rid of this file here. Double click it, hit delete. Command Spacebar. So we recorded some MIDI with our MIDI instrument here. Now, if I double click into the MIDI itself, it'll open up the editor window, MIDI editor window. I'm actually looking at all the notes that I played. You can see, that might have been a mistake. I can click on that, hit delete, it's gone. I can also trim and adjust the length of these. I could copy paste, Command C, Command V. Let's copy paste a row of those. The other thing is if the velocities were weird, I can make adjustments to the velocities. Velocities are how loud they're played. So if I want to change velocities, I can do that there. I can simply, if I hold Control, it'll switch over to my pencil tool. I can technically write in all of these. Let me do it here. If I wanted to make adjustments to these, pretty easy to do. So that's an easy way to get into the virtual instrument and the MIDI information that goes with it. And let's see, if we want to now create more virtual instruments, we can set them up. One thing we could easily do, and a lot of times I suggest if it's something like you don't want to have to go through and do the routing, you can just hit duplicate and just say, all right, I don't want the playlist, I don't want the MIDI information, but I do, and I don't want the alternate playlist, but I do want everything else, so that the same synth is ready to rock. All right, so I can jump to the next one. So listening to this one and I want to record. And that way we're getting that stacked motion. We're able to record very easily by layering.